Good afternoon, Scott Baker. A tall task in this Lead Better conversation. We're going to cure myopia.
Okay, I'm out. Sorry.
Right.
How do I turn off my camera? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we're gonna give you a new set of glasses here today.
Yeah.
The field note that we're talking about here on this edition of Lead Better, field note number 1577 is team members who only see the small picture.
Right. So we spoke a couple weeks ago about A players and B players and C players. And so that definition will kind of come into play here. So we might be best served to kind of state it up front because leaders talk in this kind of metaphor all the time about who their A players are and who their B players are. But there's not a common valence around what it means to be an A player and what it means to be a B player, or even if C players even exist, right? And so we posited the idea
they definitely exist.
of what that definition is. And so we like to be able to say like an A player is someone that if you give them the goal, they don't need the strategy or the tactics. They're good to go with just the goal. A B player, you might give them the goal, but they also need help on strategy. They might have tactics that are ready to go, but they don't think strategically. That's a B player. But a C player, if you give them a goal and the strategy, they also need help with the tactics as well. And that's the way that we defined what an A, B, and C player is. And so today's field note is more about the idea of like, all right, how do we move someone who is a C player to being a B player here?
Yeah.
And so it's an incremental step.
How do you get them to look up?
Yes.
They're so focused on the details, the task right in front of them, they go right to that. And all right, how do I get that done? How do I not displease you? Right. And that's all they're thinking about.
Yeah. And it's funny because like in the industrial age, it's like the biggest employers were almost always just looking for C players who are just going to be on an assembly line and keep down and get really good at one tactical thing that they did over and over again. You almost did not want them to be aware of like the overall strategy because that might actually be more distracting than them just keeping their head down. Well, there are a few jobs left like that, a shrinking number in the United States as well. But what we really want, for most leaders, they want to turn B players into A players, C players into B players, and getting them to look up is now a normal part. And where does it happen in the educational process at this point? Right?
Yeah. Well, and one thing that's good that you're hinting at here, and not a little more stronger than hinting, is, well, what is the reason that we're thinking about this? I mean, because obviously sometimes you might have people on the team and she just sees it that way and he just does it that way, and you just kind of leave it and that's just how they're going to be. Right. But if you're letting people kind of stay where they are and they have more potential, then you're kind of doing leadership malpractice, right? The goal here, and that's what's really underlined at the beginning of the field note, is that if you're letting people kind of just stay fixed where they are in terms of seeing the small picture and missing the big picture, this is going to limit their ability to kind of get into whatever next leadership role that they have. And if you're going to be a world-class leader, you're going to need to have a leadership tree that's very strong. Here's a good leader. Here's a good leader. And they had some strengths. They brought things. They had other people influence them. But you hope that you were part of the fact that they began to flourish as leaders. And so then the question here, and that's where kind of the 3 steps that are in this field note go, which is how can you begin just routinely to always be looking for ways to cultivate that ability to help people on your team have a little wider lens, get rid of a little bit of the decision process myopia, and then not only do the problems get solved, not only do the projects become more impactful, but you're raising not only their sights, but their horizons for their own leadership.
Right. So I had this happen to me just today.
Only one. I was going to say only once, but
no, I was actually kind of disappointed in myself. And then reading through this and then our knowledge of the A, B, and C players. Our team lead threw out a challenge to me. He recognized, okay, we're coming up on 100,000 subscribers to Field Notes. And so we want to do something to celebrate that. And
Yeah.
so the goal was thrown out, right? And I understood about the strategy, right? So I wasn't good. There were certain tactics that I wasn't going to suggest because I knew that we are normally not self-promotional. So the normal way that a lot of people who run their newsletters, their email newsletters, is they kind of say out loud that they're celebrating this benchmark.
Yeah. Right.
But they woohoo it in such a way that is really just self-promotional. And we are like the antithesis of self-promotional in the way that we do many of those things. And so Randall threw this out.
However, well, okay, I'll come back to I have a little side on that, but go ahead, keep going.
Okay, well, he threw it out like 4 or 5 weeks ago. He said, we need to figure out some way to commemorate what we're going to do with field notes.
And part of that was internal. Yeah.
Well, I didn't, and that was probably my thought. I was only thinking of how are we going to celebrate this, because we're not going to be intentionally, being self-promotional. So I couldn't think of a way to, and so I didn't even consider internal communication tactics. I only was thinking about external communication tactics, which were all immediately cut down because we're not going to be self-promotional, right? So today at our meeting, it became abundantly clear to me that I was not even a C player, because the tactics that I wasn't suggesting, of course, didn't come up. And then I was given 2 tactics, and I like the 2 tactics that were suggested. We're going to move forward on those, and I'm going to be able to execute on those. But I'm not proud of the fact that I can execute on these 2 tactics, because he gave us the goal. I didn't come up with the strategy, and I maybe even missed on the idea that it was internal instead of external, and therefore didn't come up with a good tactic, right? So now I'm just waiting for him to kind of enact on the rest of this field note to be like, okay, I need to get Mikey to be thinking about
right,
goal setting and strategy meetings more often here. So,
well, the I guess we still can't talk about the internal or external tactics of how we celebrate 100,000 on our field notes. My little aside before we come back to this larger issue of getting people to kind of look up and have a bigger view is, by the way, because people that would be watching this or listening to this on a Saturday after they read the field note and they're like, let me find 2 numbskulls that are going to talk about this, and maybe there'll be a little nugget that they can hold on to. They would probably tend to be in the category of people who also love reading field notes, love talking about these things. So the point, even in saying, well, we haven't really trumpeted how we do here, because it's a little more casual, and everyone watching or listening, you're part of this. So when we say, look, there's 100 people in 182 countries that read field notes, we actually looked up the person who was the first external person to follow us on field notes. That person is still following us and very involved in all parts of our platform, reading field notes. Like, it's a tremendous credit.
I was so excited to see that the very first person who officially subscribed to us, so this was more than 4 years ago, that same reader has opened 183 of the last 185 emails that we've sent.
That's amazing.
So he's still very engaged after being the first.
Yeah, which is a great credit. Now, our point is, I came to this firm because I was recommended to, when I asked a very influential person, and they said, you should hire this person as your coach. So it was the founder of Admired Leadership. But they were fairly invisible. But here's the deal. That when I had that encounter, and I've talked about it, where I said, I'm a good reporter. I can't find out much about you. And Randall said, well, our clients like secrets and they don't like hucksters. And that really was like, oh, wow. But what I realized is, within their own world, that spread like wildfire, right? Yeah. From one CEO to another. It was the best way of saying, if you find real value in this, tell everybody. Right. It would do no good for us, even in saying, look, we think week-long retreats that you were just at one of them with clients are tremendous. Not everybody can go there, but you should, right? If you hire one of our coaches, it's absolutely life-changing. Not everybody can do that, but you wish that you could. Not everybody can be part of our main platform, which has all of the 100 plus behaviors and details on all of that. Not everybody can. So we still give away more leadership content in Field Notes. It would be no good for us to say, let's just not tell anybody. Yeah. Right? Because then we're not actually changing the world. The whole point of even doing Field Notes and doing this was to say, do we think that we actually have a better way of thinking about leadership, something that is wildly transformative for the people that get involved in it? Yes, we absolutely do. So therefore, we should tell somebody. Now, I'm using this as an illustration, which to say, I could be in the tactics of saying, well, we're going to do this video and we could produce this field note. I need to see a vision for the fact that we're actually trying to change the vocabulary, the conversation around leadership. And that elevates the reason why 100,000 is a marker to celebrate both internally and externally. We would love that to be 1 million people, because 1 million better leaders is better than 100,000, which is better than 10,000, which is better than 1,000. And nobody, I don't think, is being damaged by reading Field Notes. Right. So we have to find the ways to kind of elevate those things. And that's why the Field Note then kind of gets into well, these are fairly simple steps, in terms of how we involve people in the strategy, how we get them to kind of map, the process of that, and how we get them to benchmark the results.
Right. So this kind of thinking is something for me that came up. I was in high school and I was listening to a radio interview, and a guy was talking about he had multiple stepdads come in and out of his life. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about the advantages and disadvantages of each one of the stepdads. And he mentioned one of them. He's like, now, the way that guy changed my life is he's the one who got me to start thinking about what my next step was always going to be like right. Now he dogged me about it, but I couldn't step into the kitchen and make a sandwich without him questioning, what are you thinking about right now that you're going to do next? Like, you're putting salami on bread, but what are you thinking about while you're making your sandwich? What's the next thing you're going to do? And then what's the next thing you're going to do? And I don't know why that was so impactful for me. I still remember it viscerally today, but it was like, that was
you're just in this, you were a kid.
Yeah, I was a kid.
Yeah. You're just in the car and you're like, oh, wow. Right. What am I going to do when I get out of this car?
Yes. And so that radio interview didn't even recognize how it was impactful. But everybody needs a leader or a mentor in their life who is going to gently but powerfully say, okay, let's think it through. What's next? Like, what are you doing with your brain right now? Let's do next. If you've never kind of come to that, maybe you're the leader who needs to be able to do that for others.
Well, the easy parts in breaking this apart is when you're getting somebody to kind of do that and getting them involved in thinking about strategy. That's usually sort of that's an apprentice kind of situation. You're in a role, you've done this, you've gone through it. Watch how I do it. Watch how I do it. Watch how I do it. Help me while we do it. Let me see how you would do it. I give you feedback. And now you're kind of ready to say, here we go. Then if we're looking at the map of where do you go, I remember early on, I heard this, and then I began teaching it, in seminars that I did, going back 30 years ago, working that strategy backwards. Like, if you said, all right, well, if this is the outcome, well, what happens right before that? And what happens right before that? And what happens right before that? And you start to get the connection steps that you might have missed if you were looking at it in this way, right?
Right.
Well, that's a wonderful way to look at it, right? Mm-hmm. Then the benchmark part is simply a matter of saying, well, who are the people that are doing really well, could be competitively in your organization. And sometimes you say, look, we got to be true to ourselves, but you need to know where the adjacent opportunities are, where your excellence is something unlike anything else that's being done out there. And you won't know that if you don't know what else is going on. So I think all three of those things, are really important and are really, valuable. But the last thing, that I would kind of use as a way that I've been thinking about this, more recently, and I mentioned this maybe a year or two ago on our conversations about the Daily Field Note, was when I heard Andrew Huberman, who's often cited, but his whole thing is his expertise is the eyes, right? That's at Stanford. And he talked about the fact that when we're in something intense, we tend to get a very great tunnel vision. So, and he used it in terms of high intensity exercise, which is an area that I know a great deal about over the last 20 years. And he is absolutely right. When you're in the middle of the onslaught of that, you tend to kind of get very narrow in your perception. It is almost like a tunnel vision. And he is saying you almost feel physically oppressed. And if you actually just physically widen the horizon of your peripheral vision, you will start to feel, and this could be whether you're lifting barbells or you're jumping on boxes or you're pedaling on a bike, and all of a sudden it's not that the work is any actually less difficult, but you perceive it much differently because you widen the aperture of your exposure. Right. I think that's what this field note is asking us as leaders to do with the people on our teams. Get them to look up, look wider, see the bigger picture, and that will help with the small steps and the small corrections.
Right. Now, the benchmarking results has a tendency to make my focus more narrowed, right? Instead of it being widened.
Sure.
And so I think sometimes
you got to come back to it. Come back to the big picture at the end.
Right, exactly. Or I need to benchmark wider results instead of just the simple tactics that I'm working on. So, but either way, benchmarks are certainly encouraging, right? And so many people don't track. Like we talk about tracking in leaders, but like this benchmark tracking is something that needs to happen a lot more often.
Yeah, no doubt. Right. Dynamite. Love this one.
All right. Thanks very much. Good to talk to you. Talk tomorrow.
Thanks, Mikey.
All right. Bye now.